The love of her life transitioned on March 12, 1998. In as many words, my father had previously told my mother and several others that she would not only fill but also stretch his shoes. But she didn't believe him. How could she? After all, he was an enigma, the great man of faith. Everyone knew that you didn't just meet Benson Idahosa, you experienced him. For 40 years, she had experienced him walk in his divine nature, speak life to dead things, boldly challenge the political status quo, and brazenly declare, "I and they that God has given me." She thought he would live till he was 120, but I can still hear her screaming the words, "Daddy is gone." How would a grieving widow not only fill but also stretch his shoes? How would she shelve her own grief, which to date still emerges uninvited in the shadow of first, and step in to lead the hundreds of thousands? Somehow she knew that those who bear scars must heal the wounded. And so as she buried the love of her life that day, she recalled their last conversation on the day he transitioned. My father had called her that morning to say that he had completed all that God had asked him to do. She flippantly asked him to ask God for more. But what only a few people know is that in response, he asked her to anoint herself with oil and to repeat the phrase, "It's my turn." Somehow he knew she was ready, and she was. For many years after they married, my parents could not have children. My mother still describes that season as one of the darkest and most alienating of her life. Not simply because for some women nothing ever quenches a curiosity that's laced into longing to hold your own, but also because some of my father's family were unrelenting in their assault of her soul. From being called barren to cursed to unworthy to bear my father's name, my mother was publicly shamed, ridiculed, and ostracized. It resulted in the kind of agony that kept her knocking on heaven's door for relief. Unless you've walked a mile in childless shoes, you just won't understand the silence and the echo. Yet she stayed faithful in building my father's vision and nurturing her own, all while God appeared silent. It was in this season that my father covered her. When demands came for him to discard her, to take another wife, he made a choice. He chose us, his biological children, because he knew what he knew. He loved that which was not as though it were. And so he protected her, assuring her that beauty would one day be exchanged for ashes, and so it was. Not only did they have 4 biological children, my mother was blessed with 4 more and raised thousands of others who were reflecting divinity and transforming the world. In fact, if you're listening to this, chances are that you consider yourself one of her children too. My mother still loves my father as fiercely as the day that she married him. When she speaks of him now, though, there is often the soft quiver in her voice that gives away the longing in her heart for her first and only love. This is her love story. One would never ever guess that they started from the humblest of beginnings, with her entrusting her life to a young maverick who didn't even have enough money to buy his own suit for their wedding. Yes, it was borrowed. His shoes, borrowed. Wedding car, also borrowed. In fact, they had to return it before the wedding reception was over. They walked home. You see, before they were one, they were 2 friends who would spend hours talking and listening, all while eating her mother's leftover akara. Somehow, he had convinced her that she needed an older brother to protect her from the dozen suitors he dissuaded her from marrying. Yes, even then, handsome brother Benson, as she called him, had undeniable swag. As she walked down the aisle that day, she realized that she had not bought into his current status, but into his vision, which she intuitively trusted was intertwined with her own. It was that commitment to global transformation that kept her loving this man for 29 years, long after he could afford to buy his own suit. This was the last photograph they took together. His loving gaze remained on her, but it's not my favorite. This one is. I often wonder what she was saying to him. That is, if she was saying anything at all. Today is my mother, Archbishop Dr. Margaret Benson Idahosa's 81st birthday. She was the first female archbishop on the continent of Africa, courageously stepping into leadership of the ministry after my father, Benson Idahosa, transitioned in 1998. I seriously doubt that she believed him when he told her that she would stretch his shoes. The only child to her mother, she started from the humblest of beginnings. In fact, to make ends meet, she would hawk 2 trays of akara at 5 a.m. every morning so she could afford to go to school. It was while committed to her future that she met my father, and they journeyed together for 29 beautiful years. But even if she had chosen an alternate path, God would still have blessed the labor of her hands. You see, she's fierce like that. Thank you, Mommy, for being a maverick who has shown us what it means to lead amidst trials, to stand amidst storms, and to overcome against all odds. On behalf of the millions of lives that you have transformed, the tens of thousands of women that you have uplifted, and the thousands of children that you have raised, we wish you a happy birthday and long life to fulfill all the true stretching that God has called you to for such a time as this. Happy birthday, Mama.